This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Agon Rav Yom Tif. This will be our last share before Yom HaKippurim, as well as before Sukkot. So Bez Hashem will pick it up after Yom Tif, and we're continuing now in the Orchos Chaim of the Rosh. We're up to Ois Tes. The Orchos Chaim says, "Shelo yichana shem lechaveroi." Do not give your friend a nickname. Shelo yikraenu. You should not call him bekinoi shekinu acherim, in a name that others called him. Im lo yaniskar v'nichvad b'shmai, unless he is mentioned and honored by that name. So it's saying, don't give your friend a nickname, a name that others gave him, unless it's he's mentioned and honored with that name. That implies that if you ask the guy, what's your name? And he says, oh, my name is Shorty. So you could give him that name, because that's what he responds to. Because it has to be a name, you should not give him a name that others call him. It sounds like if he himself is called by that name, if he himself uses that name, then it's okay. Furthermore, on the other hand, it says unless he himself is mentioned and honored by that name. It almost sounds like even if he himself uses it, but if it's not an honorable name for him, then you should not use it. Now, the Rosh implies that you should not use this nickname even if it's not a disparaging name. If you look in the Gemara Bava Metzia and Chesam and Beis, Reb Goldberg quotes, he brings, and everyone who goes down to Gehenna comes up eventually, except for the three people who don't come up. One who lived with a married woman, someone who embarrasses his friend publicly, and one who gives his friend a nickname. So the Gemara asks, embarrassing and giving a nickname, it's all the same. And the Gemara answers, no, the case where you can't give the nickname is even though he's used to it, so he doesn't get embarrassed, still, somebody who does so will not come out of Gehenna. However, the Lashon of the Gemara there is, mechana shem ra lechaver. You give him a bad name. But let's say a guy's name, he's not bad. Let's say you call him the champion. So it's not a bad name. It's a good name. He's the champion. The only thing is, it's not his name. His name is Yankel. His name is not the champion. His name is Beryl. But still, the Gemara is mashma that somebody will not come out of Gehenna if it's a bad name. But the Rosh implies, even if it's not a bad name, it's just not his name, that's also not proper. And that is based in the Gemara in Megillah, that Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai said he was Zoicha for Arichas Yomim, not giving his friend, because he didn't give his friend a nickname. And Tosfos there says, even if it's not a kinoi of Genai, the Gemara that says Ein Lo Chelek L'Olam Haba is a nickname of Genai. But if it's just a regular nickname, it's still not proper. And one who is Zahir not to use the nickname, it's a skula for Arichas Yomim. So if Goldberg wants to know, what's the maila of not using a nickname if it's not a bad name? If it's, let's say he's a lefty pitcher. Rabbi Scheinberg used to say that when he was young, he was a good pitcher. They used to call him Lefty Scheinberg. So let's say a guy, he's a pitcher. You call him Lefty Friedman. There's a maila not to call someone. There's nothing. He's a lefty. He's a southpaw. What's wrong with calling him that? It sounds like it's not kavod ha'adam. A person was given a name. That's the name that min hashamayim, the Rebbeinu Shalom put into the mind and the heart of the parents. This is the name that sort of captures the person's essence. And by not using his name, it's like you're withholding the proper kavod that he deserves. Okay, we move on. Ois Yud. Shelo yisaper Lashon Harah v'shelo yikablanu. You should not speak Lashon Harah, you should not accept Lashon Harah. Okay, that's obvious. We all know that's a Isser D'Oraisa. The Gemara says, M'sachim, kol ha'misaper Lashon Harah, kol ha'makabel Lashon Harah, roi lahashlichai leklavim. Rav Goldberg cites a very powerful story about Reb Baruch Ber from the Sefer Harav Hadom L'Malach on Reb Baruch Ber's Zehiros not to be makabel Lashon Harah. There was rumors were spreading about a certain shoichet that he was not reputable, and some of the Rosh Yeshiva and Rabbanim, they announced right away they're not going to be using the shoichet. And Reb Baruch Ber said, hey, not so fast. He's going to have to investigate himself, but he's not going to rely on a rumor. And he said he heard from the Beis Halevi the following question. 2 Eidim testify, Ruvain owes Shimon money. So we'll be moitzi the money from Ruvain, and we'll give it to Shimon. How could we do that? But maybe the Eidim are liars. Maybe they're Rishoim. Why do we? It's possible. It's a suffix, right? It's definitely possible the Eidim are not kosher, and they're Rishoim. So then how could we be moitzi mamon? You're going to say, oh, well, probably they're not. I mean, probably. You can't be moitzi mamon with a roiv. You can't take away money al pi roiv. And ein hochem mamon achar roiv. So if ein hochem mamon achar roiv, so then how could you use Eidim to take away money? The answer is because the Eidim have a cheskas kashrus. But wait a second. Roiv is sure ruba v'chazaka, ruba adif. So if roiv can't be moitzi mamon, why could chazaka? So says Rabbi Baruch Ber, the Beis Halevi said, cheskas kashrus is not a chazaka. We don't know what to do, so we'll act as if we'll keep them with the status quo. Cheskas kashrus makes it that we don't have a suffix at all. There is no doubt over here. And therefore we have to realize if every Jew has a cheskas kashrus, they have a status of being reliable, believable, God-fearing, and that's an iron wall. And every Jew deserves that kind of respect, that they're bechezkas kosher, and if you hear a bad report, you have to assume it's not true. Again, you can't be a fool. Al tehit tzaddik harbe. You have to be suspicious, but you can't accept it as fact. So that's maybe a good attitude to go into the Yom HaKadosh with, that every single Yid has a cheskas kashrus, and it's not just the chazaka that works misafek, but it says that in our eyes, every single Jew should be deemed a Yerei Shamayim, a kosher Yid, somebody who is worthy of all the brachas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if we treat everyone like that, I'll end with a story. They came to the Kotzker Rebbe, and they told the Kotzker Rebbe, in a certain city they have many Hasidim. So the Kotzker Rebbe said, is there a Rebbe? They said there's no Rebbe, but we all consider ourselves equal. So the Kotzker Rebbe said, then you're not Hasidim. A Chassid is someone who considers their friend better off than they are. Because I know, Lev Yoidea Maras Nafshi, I know my own faults. But my friend, he has a cheskas kashrus. And on that note, I want to tell you something very powerful. I just heard my friend, Rabbi Meir Bronstein, told me over in the name of Reb Shach, a very powerful idea. The Gemara says in Bamatzia, the name Ma'ov the Haaretz, why was Eretz Yisrael destroyed? The Gemara says nobody could figure out. Davar Zeh, they asked the Chachamim didn't know. They asked the Nevi'im didn't know. They asked the Malachi Asharis didn't know. Until HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself told them, hey, Yidden, the reason why the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed was because Shalai Berchu B'Torah Tchila. So Rav Shach asked a very powerful question. God only brings Yisurim if it has a purpose. But if nobody knew why it was being destroyed as it was happening, then what was the purpose in the Yisurim? If nobody knew, if it was so difficult to determine what the sin of the Jewish people was, so why did God bring Yisurim on them? The whole purpose of Yisurim is to be mefashpesh b'masav and figure out what the problem was. But here even the angels didn't know, the Chachamim didn't know, the Nevi'im didn't know. So what's the purpose of Yisurim? The answer is, the Chachamim didn't know why it was happening to everyone. They didn't know what the national issue was. The Nevi'im didn't know what the national issue was. The Malachim didn't know what the national issue was. But every single Yachid, when Yisurim were happening, he knew it was because Shalai Berchu Tar B'Tchila. Because there's a concept, Lev Yoidea Maras Nafshay. We know what our problem is. We know what our faults are. We know what we have to correct. The Malachim didn't know what the national problem was. The Chacham didn't know what the national problem was. The Nevi'im didn't know what the national... But every Yachid, you better believe, they knew exactly what their issue was. The Sforno writes, On the Mikhi HaMitzvah Hazois, this mitzvah of tshuva, loy me'ever layamhi, it's not overseas. Sfarno says, you don't need to go to a chacham to ask the chacham what I need to correct. Loy me'ever layamhi, you don't have to go up to the shamayim to ask malachim what your faults are. No secret. Ki karoi ve'lecha, it's very easy to know what our problem is. Really? Who's going to tell me? The answer is, we don't need anyone to tell us. Leiv yoidea maras nafshenu. We all know best what our issue is. And that's, in a way, why mitzvah of tshuva is easy. Because right now, we could all identify the things that we need to improve on. And if we could make some improvement on it, then the Yom Kippur will be a very successful day. I wish everybody a Gemar Chasima Tova. Thanks everybody for joining. Bracha v'atzlacha. And a Gebench Diyar. Shkayach. Kol tov, kol tov. Gemar Chasima Tova.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.